Today I'll show you how you can write and consume your own API controller in Blazor WebAssembly with all the basic HTTP methods, that's get, post, put and delete. So let's get coding. Hey, what's up wonderful human beings, so thanks for coming back. As part of the tutorial from last week, what we've done is we have created a simple Blazor WebAssembly application with a web API that we're accessing from our WebAssembly project through the server project. And I'm going to show you what I mean in a moment. And this is the page that we have created, the dashboard page roughly, and we've got a list of coffees. And if we open up the dev tools and we head over to the network tab and we reload the page, as you can see, our second method here, XHR method, is a list method to our coffee controller that returns back a list of coffees, as you guessed. And then if we click on one of the coffees, there, as you can see, we make a second request to the server, to our coffee API with the ID of 2, because that's the ID of this coffee, and this returns back the instance of that coffee. That was pretty simple. We've set that up in like half an hour, and if you want more details, obviously I'm going to link you up in the description of this tutorial with that particular video, so you can go ahead and watch it after you've watched this one, obviously, but you won't need to, because I'll go through the changes that we've made so far as part of this tutorial. So obviously everything starts with a brand new Blazor WebAssembly application. So open up Visual Studio, go create a new WebAssembly application, and it is very important, obviously give it a name, but it is very important to make it .NET Core hosted, because that will generate for us a Blazor server application that we will be where we'll create the controllers in. So this is the application roughly as we left it off last time. I've made some minor improvements, but nothing to worry about. So the first thing that we've done as part of as part of our previous tutorial is we have created a coffee business model, and that's very simple. It's got an ID, a title, and a description, and these are some annotations to enforce validation on the UI. And then the second thing that we've done, we've set up the coffee API controller, which is this one. I'm just going to quickly collapse the Solution Explorer. Oh, by the way, 3 projects as part of this that are generated for us. We've got the client project, which is the web API, the WebAssembly project, sorry, and then we've got the server project, which is Blazor server project, and we've got the shared project where we can store our models. Okay, so this is the coffee controller, and the route to this controller is the name of the controller, which is coffee, and then / whatever the endpoint or whatever the parameters will need to access a particular method inside this controller. We've got a list of coffees that we've generated so that we don't create any sort of databases in memory or SQL Server databases. And we've got 2 methods, 2 endpoints. One is a get. Both of them are as part of the read set of HttpClient methods. So the first one is the get, that gets a coffee based on an ID, and the second one is a list that gets the full list of coffees that we've got stored, quote unquote, obviously. And this is very simple, right? This is just finding a coffee in the list of coffees that we've predefined, and if it's not null, then return it. If it is null, then return a not found exception. Following, we have created a dashboard that we've given a page URL of /dashboard, and we've injected the HttpClient, which we'll use to access our API, and then we've imported the coffeepicker.shared namespace. One other thing that's important in order to be able to navigate to this dashboard page, as you can see, we've got in the nav bar. What we've done is we went into the client project, shared, and then we've opened up nav menu, and we've created a new list item with the href of dashboard, and we've named it coffee, and obviously we changed the icon, right? And then in here, what we've done is, I'm just gonna scroll down to the code section, and in here we have created a field that's a list of coffees, and by default that's a new list of coffees, so that doesn't have anything. And then a selected coffee, a variable, because whenever we click on more, we actually select a coffee, so we redefine that. So the way we did that is by creating a couple of columns. So one is the left hand side column, this one, and then the other one is this one, is the right hand side column. So the first column, we called it the coffee list, the list column, and then this one is the details column. So pretty simple. We've got the title row at the top of the page, and then we've got a row where we loop through the coffees that we've returned back from the server, and then for each coffee, just go ahead and create a new card in here. This is just a simple bootstrap card that we're just styling with a few classes, and then if obviously if we select it, then change the background and add in the ID, the title in the card, the description, and if the more button is clicked, then go ahead and fire the details. And if you wonder how we are getting the coffees, how we are defining the coffees, that's actually in on initialized async that we're actually just calling get coffees, that does the HttpClient.getJSON from async, and that expects a list of coffees, and this is the route. So coffee/list, and if we head over back to the controller, this is what we have specified. So as you can see, the route to this particular method is /list, so the name of the controller, yeah, which is coffee / and then list, so we can access this particular method, and we don't pass in any parameters. And then when, like I said, when the more button is clicked, the get details function is triggered, and what that does is it defines the selected coffee, yeah, it initializes it, and then it defines it with the data from our server, if obviously we've found something. And in our case, that route, that URL is coffee / and then the ID of the coffee that's passed in by the button when that is clicked. So if we head back to the controller, as you can see, we are expecting just an ID parameter. So we've used the exact same method, get from JSON async, and we're putting in here, we're setting the expected type that we're basically expecting back. So that is pretty much how I'm doing it. The only other thing that we've done it last time, is we've created a second container, like I said, a second column to show the details, and if the selected coffee is not null, and then go ahead and show me the title and the description. So that's how we make it so that when you click on more, it goes ahead and fires a HTTP request, sends a HTTP request, a GET request, yeah, and then as soon as it's got those details, it shows them on the right hand side of the screen. But obviously, if you still feel like you need to get more details into how we've actually accomplished all of these, go ahead and watch that tutorial and then come back to this one, because this is a more comprehensive tutorial on Web API and how we can access that API controller, and how we can create the methods, and how we can access all of them. So that's not only list and get, we also are going to do create, update, and delete. Okay, following, on the next step is to create an edit form. So that's a Blazor EditForm, and this is very simple. It's called EditForm, and it's got a class, and to make it nicer, we give it a class of container. Yep, and then a model. And a model is something that we assign, is an object that we assign to the entire form. So that's going to be selected coffee. And then on valid submit, we are going to pass in a method. So let's call it handle valid submit. We haven't created this method yet. So this selected coffee is what we return when we click the more button. And then inside here, we are going to add a couple of components. That one of them is data annotations validator and data summary, so that it imports this validation, so we don't have any sort of like empty coffees in our list, passed in our list. And then following, we'll add a few inputs. So this couple of inputs are to be able to edit the title and the description. So we've got here the label is the title, and very important, we've added an input text for the title, so that it's just a simple input type text field with the attribute of bind value equals to selected coffee dot title. It's very important to do this, otherwise you won't be able to modify the title in the actual object that you are binding to the edit form, yeah, which is selected coffee. And obviously a placeholder and the class of font control so that it looks decent. And then for the description, we've added a input text area with a bind value of selected coffee dot description, and that's it. That's very, very simple to do. Last but not least, what I have added is a save button, and that's just a simple button with a type of submit, and every time you click that button, the handle valid submit will be triggered, obviously provided that the form is valid, because we've added these two tags, these two components at the very top of our edit form, and you'll see why those are useful in a moment. But like I said, that's to ensure that you're not entering any sort of empty values in our list. So that's it with this edit form. This will allow us not only to see the data that we've got in our list grabbed from the controller, but also to edit it and to save it, to update it, and yeah, that it provides us with that level of flexibility. Following, let's just simply create this handle valid submit method so that we can run the app and see what we've got so far. So I pasted that in. So it's basically a asynchronous method, asynchronous of type task, called handle valid submit. And if we open up Chrome back again, and this is the page, and if we click on more, you'll see that instead of just paragraphs, we've got an actual form generated for us by Blazor, with the help of the Blazor EditForm. So we've got a title and we've also got a description, and as you can see, we can actually go ahead and modify this, and we've got a save button as well, but obviously that's not going to do anything because we haven't set up the saving functionality yet. Hey, and if you enjoyed this tutorial so far, why not hit that like button so this tutorial can spread to as many people as possible? I would really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Okay, so for the time being, this doesn't do anything, but we need to set up the API controller so far. To set up the create methods, as you can see, we've left some empty placeholders here to signify that that's where we're going to create those methods: the create, the update, and the delete. So let's start with the create method. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll copy and paste the markup from the list, so the code from the list, and this is going to be a HTTP post method, HTTP post, yeah, without any sort of custom routes, because this is going to be the only post method inside this particular controller. If you were to have at least two, then you'll need to give them different routes, and to do that you open and close parentheses, and then you give this post create or post update or whatever the name of the method is. But in our case, this is going to be the only one. We're going to name this create, and then in here these are the steps that we need to do. The parameter that this is going to take in is a coffee. one step that you won't have to do with an EF core database, but you'll have to do with our list, is to do a coffee.id equals to, and then we get a count of all the coffees, and then we increase that by 1. So like I said, in a real database, you won't have to do this because it's already generated for you. But we'll simulate that with our application as such. And then let's add it to the list, coffees.add, and then let's add the coffee to the list because we've already passed in a coffee from the UI through this HTTP post request, and we're grabbing it in here, and we're increasing the ID, and then we're just adding it to, we're appending it to the list. And then let's find it now. So var new coffee equals to coffees.find, or first or default, whatever you are comfortable with. I'm just going to use find now, .find, and then o.id equals to coffee.id. So in essence, the ID that we've just generated here. So find me the coffee with the ID that's matching the ID above. Yeah, and then return that new coffee in an OK result. So new coffee. And that's it with the create method. Following, let's create the update method. And in here, the logic will be like such. We'll grab the old version of that coffee, and then we'll update the fields, and then we will save that version, that new version of the coffee, back into the list. So let's do that. Obviously, I'm just gonna, again, which one? Let's copy this one. And then this is going to be a HTTP put method without any parameters, like this. We won't pass in any parameters in the URL. We're actually going to pass them into as arguments. So that's going to be called update. And then in here, again, a coffee type called coffee, or new coffee, say. Yep, new coffee, because this is going to be the updated coffee from the UI. So like I said, in here, var the old coffee is going to be the coffees, and like I said, you can do first or default here, with where the ID is equal to new coffee.id. Yeah. So then we're checking here if the old coffee is not null. In other words, if we have found a coffee that's matching this, then go ahead and do the update. If we didn't find a coffee, then return a not found result. Coffee not found. Yep. But then in here, we're actually ensuring that we found a coffee. So then in here, let's do the update. So the way to do that in just a simple list of objects is just to do a old coffee dot, to do it property by property. So .coffee by .title is equal to the new coffee .title. Yeah. So that's it's pretty basic, and then we do the same with the description. Okay. So then in the EF core, you would do here the db context dot save changes, but then we don't have to save the changes here. So we're just gonna return the new object in an OK response message. So new coffee. So we're returning new coffee. Okay, so that is put. Last but not least, we'll create the delete method. And that is going, again, I'm going to copy one of the methods that we've already created. And as you guessed, the request type is going to be HTTP delete. And then this is going to take in an ID, being the ID of the coffee that we want to delete. We're passing in the ID of the coffee into the method arguments, and we're calling this delete. If you were to have 2 or more delete methods, obviously this would be something along the lines of delete slash and then the ID. Or if you don't want to do it in here, we can remove all of this, and you can do a route, yeah, and then you can do it in here. It's exactly the same thing. Just gonna leave it because it's simple, it's less line to write, so I'm gonna leave it like that. Okay, so in here we look for the coffee, yeah, so coffees dot first or default, where the ID matches the ID that's passed into the method, equal to ID. And obviously if the coffee is not null, then remove it from the list. So we simulate some sort of a removal from our list and return OK. But if we didn't find it, just, you know, did trail, return coffee not found. So return a 404 not found, sorry, not a 404, but not found response message. Yeah, so that is it with setting up the API controller. Okay, so back in our dashboard page, what we need to do is to set up the functionality inside the handle valid submit method, because as you can see, currently it doesn't do anything. And if we head over back to the application, we won't do anything, so nothing happens here. And what we need to do is, you've guessed it, to call the update method in here when we're making some changes, so to save those changes. And to do that, what we'll do is create a HTTP response message, local variable that's enclosed in this function, and we'll call this response, and then we'll define that response as the actual method, because we want to keep a hold of the response. So what we need to do here is do HttpClient dot and then the name of the function. So where in this case we did get from JSON async, we'll do HttpClient dot put as JSON async, and then this expects a type, and the type will be a coffee type that we're going to be passing into our method. So this expects a type, so this type is coffee, and like I said, we're going to pass in the type as well. Open and close parentheses, and then the first parameter is the name of the route, so the URL to that method. So in our case, it's just coffee, because we haven't added any sort of custom URL to access this particular method. So it's just a put is the only put inside the inside this API controller, and this is going to target the update method. And then the second parameter to this method is the actual selected coffee. Yeah, so that's it. So we're calling the put as JSON async, and we're saying, and I'm going to give you, and I'm going to pass in a coffee type, and then the route is coffee, and then I'm passing in the object that I want to update. And this is erroring because it expects an await, so this is not awaited. And then if, let's just check really quick, if the response is successful, yeah, is success status code, which is a boolean, then do something. So in this case, what I'll do is I'll simply redefine the selected coffee as the response that we're getting back, because if I remember, we're actually returning back the new coffee, so the updated coffee. And sometimes it's good to do that because you can update the UI without having to reload the page. And what we're doing is response.content.read from JSON async, and we're saying, and what we read is a coffee type. And we know that we can actually, we have content because the response has a successful status. Yeah, so if we save this and we head back to the application, this will reload in just a second. And if we open up one of the recipes and we update this here, so version 2, yeah, and then we click save, take a look at what happens in the network tab. If we expand this further and we click on the coffee, you will see that this is this just executed a put request to the coffee controller, and it's passed in the payload, the request payload, which is the actual object that we've passed in, is a coffee object. And in the preview we can see the response. As well as in the response, but we can preview it as JSON. We've got the new coffee object that's returned back. So that's saving. But what we'll also want to do is to be able to delete a coffee. And to do that, we'll actually need, because we haven't got any delete buttons, so we'll actually need a delete button. And I'm just going to paste in one that I've created earlier. We have just a simple button of type button, but the onClick event is bound to a delete coffee method, and obviously we need to create that delete coffee method. So we'll create it somewhere around here, and this is going to be an asynchronous method, so async task, and then the name of the task, and then we don't plan on doing anything with the response, but what we'll do, we'll store it as well. So var response equals to HttpClient dot delete async, and in here add a $sign so that we can escape, we can pass in the ID using some curly braces, and then the route is coffee slash and then the ID of the coffee, so that's going to be selected coffee.id. And if we save this, let's head back over to the application, and no coffee selected. If we select one and then click delete, a delete request will be sent to the API controller with the ID of 2. Obviously, it's not going to do anything because we're only working with a simple list. But in a real life scenario, if you have an EF core database, this will actually go ahead and you can configure it to delete a record from the database. So if we try this on another one, as you can see, it sent a delete request. So let's actually put some breakpoints in the API to see how this works. And to do that, you'll actually need to stop the app from running. So to do this, to run the app through the package manager console, you obviously open up package manager console and you run .NET watch run -p, that stands for project. And the default project is the server project, and make sure that you select the default project as being the server project. And let's run the app in the debugger mode. So if you open up Solution Explorer, collapse everything, click on the solution, and click on IIS Express, and let's just wait for it to load up. There we go. So this has loaded up now. And I'm not going to navigate to the coffees page yet, because let's actually add some breakpoints. So let's add one to the get, let's add one to the list, let's actually add one to the create and to the delete, because we haven't implemented the create request yet. We've only implemented the logic, the backend logic, but we'll do it in a bit. So if we head back to the app, navigate to the coffees, and as you can see, the list method is triggered. So this returns back the list of coffees. So we'll F5 that. If we select a coffee, you'll see that the get method has been, oops, I didn't want to open up the diagnostics tools. You'll see that the get method is triggered. So the coffee is found with the ID of 3, which should be cappuccino, yeah. And then if the coffee is not null, which isn't, then return it. So that's what it's doing. And then if we save, then the update will be triggered, as you can see. So it grabs a hold of the old coffee, yeah, which is cappuccino, and then it defines the new properties, the new values of the title and description properties, and returns back the updated coffee. Obviously, we haven't made any changes, so if we do make any changes, you'll see that the old coffee has got the normal text, and then the new one will actually have the weird names that I just added. So as you can see, the old coffee.description is normal, and then after we step over that line, you'll see that it's updated to the new version of the description value. So that returns that back. And then last but not least is the delete, and that takes us to the delete method right here, and grabs a hold of the coffee that we're trying to delete. That's ID of 3. That should be cappuccino, because we're only working with that for some reason. And then if it's not null, and it isn't, you'll see that the coffees now has got a count of 10 elements. Yeah, and then after we step over this, then it'll have a count of 9 elements. But obviously the UI won't change because, like I said, this list won't change, as this is just a simple list. But if this was to be a real database or an in-memory database, then this UI will update as well. Yeah, so following, we'll do the create functionality. Okay, so if we go back to the dashboard page, then expand the second column. So by the way, the code is in the description, so if you don't want to type everything out, then go ahead and go in the description, download it. Everything is there, before and after versions. The before is how we've seen it at the beginning of the tutorial, and the after is how we're going to have it finished up. And by the way, I do weekly tutorials just like this one, and if you are interested in content like this, why not subscribing and hit the notification bell so that you can get notified every time I post a new tutorial, and I would very much appreciate it because it helps the channel grow. Okay, so the only other thing that we need to do now is, in terms of UI, is to show a create button, and I'm pasting in a button that is just a simple bootstrap button with an on-click event that's bound to a function called show create. And this show create, what it will do is it will define the right hand side as a as an empty coffee object that's not going to have any values for the title. It's not going to have any values for the description. As you can see, the validation triggered because it thinks that I'm just about to save, but I'm not. I just want to demonstrate how our brand new coffee will look like. And to do that, let's create a show create method at the very bottom, and this is going to be a void called show create, and we are going to define the selected coffee as a new coffee, and that's it. If we do this, then whatever the values that were here previously will get overwritten by instantiating a new coffee object, or if we didn't have anything, it will just instantiate a new coffee object. So if we click on create, you'll see that it created a brand new object, and the validation is not triggered at this point. But if we selected another coffee and we clicked create, then as you can see, the create is there. So if we type in a title, so coffee number, I don't know, 11, and then we add a description, coffee number 11, and a weird description, and if we click save, obviously it doesn't have an ID of 11 because, as you can see, we've got only 10 coffees. So we wanted to actually call the create method, because this save actually calls the update method, as you can see. So let's do that. But how do we figure out whether this is a new coffee or an old one or an existing one that we need to update. Because if it's a new coffee, then we need to call create. If it's an already existing one, then we need to call update. Well, that's simple. All we need to do is to create a boolean at the top of the code. That's going to be a private bool called, I don't know, is creating. Yeah, and then when show create is called, then go ahead and define this is creating to true, so that in here, when where is the handle on valid submit, in here we can check. So this handle on valid submit is called from the save button. We can actually check if it's creating, then create, so call create. Otherwise, call the update, because that's this is the functionality for the update. So in here, this is going to be pretty similar. So the response equals to HttpClient, and instead of post.json put as JSON async, this is going to be a post as JSON async with exactly the same parameters, exactly the same routes. And this is going to call the very first method in the API, which is create, and is going to pass in a brand new coffee object. So if we save this, and if we head back over to the application and we leave it load, okay, and we click create, and we call this coffee 11, and then in here coffee 11 and the description, we click save, and then there you go. We've got a post request to the coffee controller with the payload of our brand new coffee 11, and then in the preview we've got the brand new coffee with the ID of 11, which is really cool. So it auto incremented this, and let's add in the debugger. So again, stop the app from running, and then go ahead and run it with iOS Express. Okay, we go to coffees. So this will trigger a list, of course. So we'll I'll just take out all the other breakpoints, and I'll leave only the create one. And I need to continue. Yeah, and then if we click create coffee 11, and then coffee 11 and the description, and we click save, then the create is triggered, and the new coffee object is passed in, coffee 11. Yeah, so if we step over, the new ID is coffee 11 because the count is 10, and then the coffees currently has a count of 10 items, and with this is going to have a count of 11 items, and then we're finding our brand new coffee that's matching the ID, and our new coffee is coffee 11, and we're passing that back to the controller, we're passing that back to the page, and as you can see, this worked. Obviously, you can take this one step further to make this create button actually say cancel, for instance, or to make this delete button disappear if we are creating. But I'm going to leave that up to you as a challenge if you want, and then hit me up in the comments if you've managed to do this. Okay, so that's pretty much it with today's tutorial. If you want to learn the basics of Blazor, I've put together a playlist right here, or if you want to see the first part of this tutorial in more detail, then I've also linked you up with that video right here. Until next time, stay safe.